Welcome to video 2 of our study planning video series. In this video, we're going to explore thoroughly what Bloom's taxonomy is and how it can help you make sure you're increasing your levels of understanding. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with a question. If I were to ask you what you thought the difference between studying and learning is, what do you think you would answer? When I present this workshop in person on campus, students often answer something to the effect of studying is short-term, learning is long-term, or studying is what I do the night before an exam to make an A, and learning is what I do if I know I'm going to have to use the material later on. Or even, studying is memorizing information, and learning is when I understand it and can apply it. If your answer was anything similar to the student example answers I provided, you're definitely not alone. Now ask yourself this: have you been approaching your schoolwork mostly in studying mode or in learning mode? Typically, most students, when asked this, they say study mode themselves. This study planning video workshop series is not only to teach you how to switch yourselves into learning mode, but how to stay there. Here's another question for you. What do you think you might study harder for? To make an A on a test, or if you had to teach the material up in front of your class to your classmates? The majority of students I ask this to tend to answer that they would study harder if they knew they had to teach the material to your class. Why do you think that might be? If you were studying material that you knew you had to later teach to your class, you'd likely anticipate your class having questions for you, and that you potentially must give the information in several different ways so that everyone in that class can understand it. Imagining that you will have to teach the material you're studying to someone later is an incredibly effective way to keep you in learning mode while studying. In fact, I often suggest to students that whatever they're studying, keep in mind that they may have to teach that material to both a 7-year-old and a 70-year-old later on. To be able to teach effectively content to both a 7-year-old and a 70-year-old means you're likely going to need to understand that material on a very high level. Bloom's taxonomy is a visualization tool that shows at what level you might understand something. At this point, you may want to pause this video so that you can locate, download, and print the provided PDF handout entitled Study Planning Workshop Handout so that you can follow along with the remainder of this study planning workshop series better. On page 2 of that handout, you will find the image you see on the screen now. As you can see, there are 6 levels of understanding to the Bloom's taxonomy pyramid. The higher you climb up the pyramid, the deeper your understanding of the topic. If you are at the base level or the remembering level of Bloom's taxonomy, that means you've memorized definitions or formulas but can't quite put that information into your own words. If you're at the understanding level, that means you can paraphrase or summarize the information. Like, you can explain it to a 7-year-old or a 70-year-old by using analogies and examples each of them could understand and relate to. If you've reached the applying level, that means you can use the information you've learned to solve problems you've never seen before. If you're at the analyzing level, you can take any concept that you've learned and break it down into its component concepts. If you've reached the evaluating level, that means you can take 2 different processes proposed by others and determine which is more likely to be correct, efficient, or desirable. And if you've reached all the way to the creating level of Bloom's taxonomy, that means you could come up with your own ideas about solving different kinds of problems or even designing your own unique processes to achieve the same goal. One way to illustrate how Bloom's taxonomy works is to explain it through the famous children's story Goldilocks and the Three Bears. If you're at the remembering level of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you could simply list the items used by Goldilocks while she was in the bear's house. If you've reached the understanding level, that means you could explain why Goldilocks liked Baby Bear's chair the best. If you're at the applying level, you could demonstrate what Goldilocks would use if she came to your house. If you've reached the analyzing level of the story, that means you could compare the story to reality by explaining what events could really happen. If you've reached the evaluating stage of the story, that means you could judge whether Goldilocks was a good person or a bad person and defend your opinion. And if you've reached the creating stage of your understanding of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, that means you could write your own story about Goldilocks and, say, the three fish, and show how it would be different from the story Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Now ask yourself, at what level of Bloom's taxonomy do I need to reach in order to make A's in my current or upcoming college courses? To learn more on how to ascend higher on the levels of Bloom's taxonomy, go now to Study Planning Video 3 in our Study Planning video series.